Yeah, so I'm Manda. Um, I am 39 years old, and I currently work in strategy and business development as a profession, and I have two children and a husband. I grew up in Western North Carolina. I stayed in North Carolina. I live here now still. As far as hobbies go, I like to be outdoors. I play with my kids and just generally like to hang out with my family. So it kind of started probably back when I was kind of ending high school, and then kind of the summer after that. I was having a lot of interesting symptoms in terms of like kind of some itching, and like my menstrual cycles were not regular. And so I told my mom, and she started to kind of look into different doctors that I could go see. And then that kind of progressed into a little bit more intense itching. And then I started to have trouble sleeping. And that was kind of after I had already started college, kind of into my sophomore year. That's when kind of the intense symptoms started to happen. So I went to the ENT in Claremont, North Carolina, where I grew up. And I think my parents specifically said, can we get a surgeon in Chapel Hill? Because that's where I was going to school.
Did you know at that point yet that there was the thought of possible cancer, or was it just like, something's not right and we need more tests?
Yeah, no, that hadn't even crossed my mind, actually. Yeah. I thought maybe I just had like mono or something, or some sort of infection that just had gone crazy.
Right, right. And so at what point, so you go into the actual appointment, this was a lymph node biopsy. So it was excisional. They actually went under, they took something out, or was it
Yeah. So I went in, and it was just at the surgeon's office. Like I didn't go to the hospital or anything. And I think it was, I don't think there was like a complete incision. I think he just kind of inserted something in there. So a week had gone by, and I was just like, yeah, I haven't heard from the doctor. My parents were constantly asking me. And then finally, my dad was like, well, we're coming up and we're going to figure out what the answer is. So they came up to Chapel Hill and called the doctor's office, or the surgeon's office. And my dad was on the phone. Actually, I didn't call them. And me and my mom were sitting there with him. And the receptionist was like, well, he's in with a patient, but I can get a hold of him for you. You just stay on the line. And so I think that would have been a red flag, because like usually they don't drop everything. And so then the surgeon came on the line, and then my dad was like, I just saw his face drop. And then that was when they were like, oh, your daughter has Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so that kind of started the thing. And so I looked at my dad and I was like, what's happening? And he was like, you have cancer. And I was just like, what? So it was just kind of weird, because I didn't actually get it from the surgeon. It was kind of like relayed from my dad, which probably was good now that I think about it, because like both my parents were there at the same time.
What was that like, being 19 and having to reconfigure your college life to this?
Like looking back, I think it was probably the best thing I could have done, because it kind of gave me normalcy. I think if I moved back home and just kind of stopped everything, I would have been unhappy. But like having my friends around and like a normal college life was actually helpful. I think I just found my people, right? And so like I had some really great friends who were willing to kind of change their lifestyle for me. I think it was just really having a support system that helped. And like allowing my friends to just be. So like sometimes they would come and just sit with me during treatment.
In hindsight now, looking at that time, is there anything that you would have done differently or asked more questions about?
Yeah, I think I wish I would have asked about fertility, honestly, because I guess I had just read everything about Hodgkin's lymphoma and how usually it's cured and you never really have to deal with it again. And so I wish I would have asked about it, because there was like a span of 8 years between like my first diagnosis and then it coming back, that I could have done something. I could have frozen my eggs, or I could have, prepared for what's next. Even if I wouldn't have needed it, it would have been nice to have had that opportunity to know that there is a chance that this could happen.
As we shift into it, Manda, you ended treatment. It was 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was 2010 when you started to feel things again. And this time you said you just knew something was wrong again.
Right. Yeah. I just knew. I just didn't feel right. And I didn't even bother going to like my primary care physician. I just kind of knew. And then I tried to kind of shove a lot of things into a couple of months that I know I really wanted to do. And then I was like, okay, now I'm ready to go tell somebody that this is back. And that's kind of how that started in 2010.
So at high level, what were those big differences in being diagnosed, and how much in the forefront fertility was in your mind?
Yeah, I think at 19, it just wasn't there at all. I think you spend a lot of your teenage years like thinking, I can't get pregnant, right? Don't get pregnant. And then in your 20s, especially since I was in a committed relationship, I thought, oh, I can see myself being a mom. And so it was pretty much at the forefront for this one for me. And the doctors also had it at the forefront as well. So they actually mentioned it the second time around about fertility and the impacts that my treatment would have on it. So it went from being nothing to kind of something that was talked about quite a bit when I was older. So the doctors actually, I think, brought it up, but they brought it up in a really weird way because I couldn't quite comprehend it at the time. So I had to start treatment pretty quickly the second time around. And so there wasn't really time to even think about freezing eggs or anything like that. And basically, a fertility specialist came in, and I was kind of just laying in the hospital bed. I just kind of received some of my ice treatment. And they were like, freezing your eggs is just not an option for you. So this treatment, along with the bone marrow transplant, is underway, and there's just not going to be an option for you to have children. It's kind of what I took from it. And then my mom, who was sitting there at the time, kind of was just like, wait, she's not really comprehending this, right? Because I was on medications, and so they definitely had to explain it to me a couple of times. And my BMT doctor kind of also reiterated, like, let's just get you better and we can talk about this later. But, as of right now, there's not going to be too many options for you. And so I just kind of just took it as like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to have kids. So that's kind of it.
The transplant specialist then said, hey, here's an oncofertility specialist, right? Can you describe the conversation?
And I was like, look, I got married, and I'm thinking about having children, and I just need to know my options, and I don't know what they are. And he's just like, oh, okay. Let me refer you to a fertility specialist that works with cancer patients. And I was like, that would be wonderful. Like, why do I have to ask for this? Like, the first thing we did is she just wanted to see like physically where I was, like from a fertility standpoint. And so she did ultrasounds and she took blood work, and she confirmed, what we had suspected. And that was it. Physically, physiologically, I was going to be able to have a child in the, I don't want to say normal way, but the traditional way. And so she confirmed all of that. And then she took me and my husband and kind of was like going through the different possibilities. And so there was like surrogacy, or there was a couple of other, like maybe adoption, and then, or kind of there's frozen embryos that you can, that can be donated. And then she was like, and then there's the IVF with an egg donor. And so she kind of laid out all those things. And she was like, I think you would be a perfect candidate for IVF with egg donor. And so I was like, oh, okay.
She brought a spirit for you too, where in the conversation that she led, you described, she said, this can happen for a lot of cancer patients or older people.
Yes.
She brought hope. Can you describe what she said and why it was so important she said it that way?
During the like the whole conversation with me and my husband, it was never a moment where she didn't think there was an option, right? She was just like, we're going to get you pregnant. You're going to have a baby. Like, this is the way to go. And the confidence that she was just very confident. And I the whole time was like, well, I don't know if this is going to work or anything. And she was just like, yeah, it's going to work. Like, I know what I'm doing. Like, so it was just kind of refreshing, I think, to have like someone who was just kind of like, this is done all the time and it's going to happen for you too. And I also had like a little bit of reservations, like, oh, will she be a little bit upset that I'm a cancer survivor and that maybe I shouldn't be having kids? But none of that came up. She was just like, you're fine. You're 5 years out. Your doctor gave you the go ahead. Like, we're doing this. So
can you actually highlight that you had a little bit of a feeling of, what was it? Like, not guilt or shame. What was that?
It was just kind of like, should I bring a child in this world that may have a mom that has cancer for a third time? And I just kind of like, a part of me was like, maybe I shouldn't have kids because I don't want to put them through that process, but I kind of thought, if I live that way, then I would never do anything.
Was there any nervousness, or what were you feeling as this whole thing was happening, the preparation and then the implantation?
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of nervousness because I was like, this is happening. And if this doctor is for real, like, this is happening. Right. So at this point, I should probably start preparing to be a mom because this is going to happen. And it did. I mean, it was like the first try, the first implantation, it worked.
Well, and so, I mean, it's beautiful what's happened. You have a son and a daughter. Can you describe your kids and how old they are? And
yeah. So my son, he's 6. He's very, I would say, like, empathetic. He kind of understands emotion. So like, he can tell when I'm not happy or stuff like that. And he likes to give me a hug when he sees that. And he's very, both of my kids are very independent. And then my daughter is just kind of, she's just goofy. She does goofy things and she tries to make everybody laugh. And so they're just really good kids, and just normal kids. It was just like kind of understanding that I got to point B in a really interesting way. And you kind of go, and it was kind of miraculous in some instances, right? So when I think back about all that I went through, and then now that I look at my kids, I'm like, they are truly unique and like never would have existed had my story not existed. And so when I think about that, it's almost as if like I would go back and do it all over again to get the same exact thing, because it kind of made it all worth it at the end. Wasn't the path I thought it would take, but I got what I had hoped for. And I just always kind of tell them, like, you are incredibly special because you came, you know, around in kind of unfavorable like circumstances. Like a lot of things had to happen for you to get here in a weird kind of way, and so that kind of makes you extra special.